Welcome, guys. Let's talk more about Taoism and Qigong. All right. So, the first question from episode 58 from Hans Mormer 1. Okay. 58. Hi, Sifu Adam. Could you please share a little bit of your knowledge on how Taoist philosophy deal with ethics and moral values? Like why murder and robbery is bad. And I would like to know if there's such a thing as pay for your action in another life, such as the notion of heaven and hell in Christian tradition or karma and samskara in Hindu and Buddhism. Thank you for your content. Wow, that was a heavy one. So let's break down your question in two so we can talk about this. Okay, the first one. Hi, Sifu Adam. Could you please share a little bit of your knowledge on how Taoist philosophy deal with ethics and moral values, like why murder and robbery is bad? Good question. In Taoism, it's like, I think it was chapter 30, I forget which chapter. Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, the most famous scripture of Taoism, really is against this idea of virtue signaling or the idea of strict morals. Not because he's immoral, but Tao Te Ching. Okay, let me find this for you, okay? I saw your question earlier, so I highlighted this. Okay, chapter 37 of the Taoist Qi Gong or Tao Te Ching. It says, when the Tao is lost, goodness appears. When goodness is lost, morals appears. When morals is lost, justice appears. When justice is lost, only etiquette is left. I don't think there's a truer word spoken, right? Because we live in a time of virtue signaling, and everybody is, when they're online, they're really busy policing people, canceling people, virtue signaling about how great they are, right? But you see them in person, a lot of time they can't even make eye contact or lack basic manners. So you would not need to say certain things like don't steal, don't rape, don't murder. The fact that you have to say it, what does it mean? Does it need to be said? If you have to say that to somebody, we have a problem, right? So, what Tao Te Ching say is right. It doesn't mean we don't need rules, laws, and morals, but it's saying, look, by the time you need those things, it means something more valuable is lost, which is the Tao. Because let's say if someone returned to the Tao or returned to the natural state. So this is unnatural. This is doing. Relaxing is not doing. Not doing by its definition is natural. Let's examine that for a second. If something is hard, is unnatural because it's doing, contriving, acting, forcing, action, right? If it's relaxed and not doing anything, it's the natural state. Well, what's the difference between the two? If you look at blockages or tension, it starts off shrinking until it can't shrink no more, then it turns really hard. So it goes from smallness to hardness. If you look at relaxing, it starts with softness, and as it softens more and more, it expands bigger and bigger. So one is based on softness and bigness, the other one's based on smallness and hardness. Emotionally speaking, what's small is fear, and what is hard is hate. What is soft is love. What is big? Confidence, courage, well-being, joy. So if you return to the natural state of softness and being big, which is love and courage, or love and confidence, or love and bliss and joy, in that state, do you need morals? Do you need rules? Do you need someone to enforce a code of behavior for you not to murder and rob people? Of course not. Do you need to be taught manners? Do you need signs to tell you not to be an asshole? Do you have to do affirmations? Do you have to remind yourself to not be a jerk to people? If you're in a loving, blissful, peaceful, giving, expansive state? Of course not. So from a Taoist point of view it's not do we need more rules, but how do you change the central nervous system so that you can return to that natural, loving, blissful, peaceful state? And in that enormous, compassionate, blissful, peaceful state, you wouldn't need a code of conduct to not be an asshole. So how do you do that? How do you get the central nervous system to go from here to here? And of course, you guessed it, right? We have laying down, moving, sitting, and standing qigong, which changes the body from the inside out. That's very different than a Confucian point of view, which is obsessed with social order, justice, code of conduct, and more importantly, how to enforce that code of conduct. So, can you ever have enough punishment to enforce a moral code? Versus, can you educate people so they can release, relax, heal, and become loving and peaceful? Historically, both didn't turn out very well. You never have enough cops to capture all the criminals. You never have enough rules of conduct and enforcement to make the entire population great, good people, or not hurt each other, right? And you never have enough healing practices to cure every emotional problem. And even if there was, good luck getting people to practice. So I guess I can't speak from a Taoist point of view, but you asked like, what are some more, Taoist thoughts on this? These are some classical Taoist thoughts on this, right? Instead of being concerned with forcing someone to obey certain rules, you change it from the inside out. If you did enough sitting, if you did enough standing, naturally your code of conduct would change without any rules or without any morals imposed on you, without any self-suppression or self-violence of contriving and forcing yourself to behave a certain way. It's a good example. I did martial arts for 40 years. And on my 35th year, out of that 35 years, I did 24 years of full-time, 6 days and 4 nights a week. I train by myself, and then my friends come over and my students. We'll do pressure testing with helmets on, go. Then I get a graveyard security job so I can test it on violent people when I get paid for it, so I can do my experiment. I was obsessed with violence and obsessed with martial arts. And eventually it fried my central nervous system. I developed a form of PTSD and I almost died. After 2 years of being sick, Western and Eastern medicine couldn't fix me. Qigong is what completely healed me. And that is why I'm doing this podcast and teaching Qigong, because I want to share these healing benefits. No amount of rules, no amount of morals, no amount of philosophy could have stopped me from doing martial art and testing it. I was obsessed with it and I love it. That kind of proved what Taoism said. Rules, morals, they only work to a certain degree. It certainly wouldn't have worked on me back then. I was obsessed with it. I was getting high with it. I was addicted to martial arts. You couldn't get me to stop. I was training and I had a time of my life. And shamefully, now I can admit it, honestly, I enjoy violence at that point in my life. For decades. But as I do more Qigong, everything softened. Everything expanded. Let go all my trauma, let go all my pain. It took a long time. I was practicing, right? And eventually I healed up and I feel euphoric. I feel a type of contentment and bliss that's extremely hard to describe during sitting. I'm on my 5th year now, practicing full time. Before that, I did Qigong for 30 years, but I was just dabbling. And when I did it, it was for the wrong reason. I just did Qigong so I can fight better. I learned the art of peace so I can hit people harder. How hypocritical, right? But as I did 5 years of intensive Qigong, 4 to 5 hours a day, every single day, never skipped a day, I completely healed myself. What I notice is, naturally, without any rules, without any contriving, without anyone forcing me, without any philosophy, without any rules of conduct, I naturally don't want to hurt people anymore. So I still practice martial art to protect myself and my wife, but I don't have that lust for violence. I don't have that obsession with martial arts. Because when I did martial art, publicly I'll teach Wing Chun, Long Fist, Hakka Fist, I'll teach martial art. But when I'm actually practicing, most of it was neck breaks and knives and swords. I was into actual combative violence, right? That getting high off it, that obsession of it, that addiction for it, that lust for it has completely left. I still practice it a little bit so I can, protect myself and my wife, but the reason has changed. That addiction is gone. But there was no rules, no moral code, No someone telling me balance is wrong, you have to stop. None of that matter because the change comes from the inside. So that's the Taoist point of view. So I hope I answered that question. As for your second part of your question, this is going to get kind of heavy. So I apologize ahead of time because this might not even make sense unless you practice a lot. But what I said so far is really good for people suffering from depression, anxiety, and unresolved anger issue, right? And that comes from practice, not a code of conduct. Okay, moving on to your second question. I would like to know if there's such a thing as a pay for your action in another life, such as the notion of heaven and hell in Christian tradition of karma, samskara, in Hinduism and Buddhism. Thanks for your content. Because Taoism is really intertwined with Hinduism and Buddhism. So I'm going to talk about it from a Taoist point of view, not from a Christian point of view, because I'm not qualified. I'm not a priest or a minister or something. I think there's a little bit, no offense at all, of misinterpretation of samskara and karma in terms of Hinduism and Buddhism. It's not that you do something and then karma makes you pay for it, like some kind of lawyer in a court. It doesn't really work like that. One of the things that happened in Dochen, the highest form of Tibet Buddhism, way past the level of Tantra, is Dochen, which one of the secret practice they have is the death rehearsal. Taoism has it, Hinduism has it, Dochen has it, and I'm sure other shamanistic practices in the world must have it, because if these three figure it out, why wouldn't others in the last 10,000 years, right? So one of the things that happen when you're sitting a lot, and if this gets too crazy, sorry, but one of the things that happen if you sit a lot, and I talked about it last episode, I think, is your body drops off, which means your mirror neurons and your spatial awareness turns off in your central nervous system, just like when people get high off DMT or marijuana or flow tank therapy. So you stop feeling your body, and if you do feel your body, it feels gooey, transparent. So you're entering an altered state of consciousness. Your brainwave has hit a different level. Okay. If you keep sitting, that's your body dropping off. Eventually, you feel your mind, personality, self-image, your thoughts as an informational field, like an aura. If you sit long enough, that drops off. So your mind drops off. So your body drops off, your mind drops off. It is at this point that when they study monks in MRI, they've proven that monks are seeing bright lights, right? They can't figure out why they see the light, but they see lights. The same kind of experience people feel when they have near-death experience, which thousands and thousands are reported around the world. When that light happens, there is a spontaneous feeling of enormous bliss and peace. It's really hard to describe. I'm not doing it any justice, and I apologize. But the first time you feel it, you want to cry. It's just so much beauty. And you realize you're made of it. It's kind of like ice is melting, and the core of the ice is water, and then the surrounding part of the ice is really hard and is really dirty. The dirty part and the ice melts. When the ice melts, the center of the ice is pure water, goes back in the ocean, and the surrounding hard part of the ice that's dirty just kind of dissolves into the ocean as well. That's the part that dies, right? But the part of you feel that merges into the ocean, you start feeling like, oh, that's what I'm made of. In Chinese, we call it Sing, or original nature, same as in Zen Buddhism. I think in Dochen they call it Ripa, but my Tibet sucks. I don't speak Tibet language, so I apologize to those that do. In Hinduism, they call it Brahman. In Buddhism, they call it emptiness, true nature, or Buddha nature. Basically, the ice has dissolved back to the ocean, and at that point, you realize you're actually water, not the container you thought that you were. Container being your body and personality. That is the essence of spirituality in terms of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. Okay, so let's say you get to that point, which maybe one of 10,000 meditators do. So, when you get to that point, is a process. If you have any attachment or desire that is strong, you get pulled back into the ice really fast. So you're dissolving, suddenly you come back. You're dissolving, suddenly you come back. And you come back in the shape and form that your mind has projected that what you want. That's what karma really means. So are you getting punished based on your wrongdoing? Well, if you have a certain desire to come back in that form, then yeah, I guess you can say, but it's not like there's some supreme judge with a lawyer. You're doing this to yourself. That's why it's karma. And if you give up all attachment and desire, including evil ones, then you dissolve into the ocean. You finally go to the light. That is the teaching, right? But it's a belief system, and therefore it is useless because you can choose to disagree. You can choose to not believe. That enters into the domain of philosophy. That's why it's useless. What I just said, everything I said. But if you actually practice, you'll experience it. At that point, it's going to be pretty hard to deny it if you experience it directly. And now it's no longer a philosophy, it's becoming mysticism, right? Or shamanism. So these teachings on karma, if you think about it, if you enter the domain of belief system, it becomes pretty useless because it just becomes another thought in your head. But if you actually practice either shamanism, religion, or mystics practices, when you directly experience it, it will change your life completely. Until one directly experiences it, in my mind, it's not that useful. And because it came from a background that I was really, really sick and this stuff fixed me, it's important to me that people get benefit out of this, especially people with heavy depression or death anxiety. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I'm pretty sure I didn't, because until you practice these things, they tend not to make much sense, right? But the closest scripture I've ever seen that does a way better job than Taoism talking about this is the Upanishads, which is one of the first, if not the first scripture of Hinduism. I'm sure you can find it online, Upanishads. Unlike Taoism, it doesn't give you poetic hints. It spells it out for you black and white. You can take it or leave it, but at least it gives you a guideline for your practice. But once you practice and you experience these things I talk about, there's no more question about karma and samskara because it's self-explanatory during the process. And a lot of people know this intuitively when they have a near-death experience anyways. So anyways, happy holidays. See you guys next time. If you're interested in learning some of these healing methods that I'm talking about, especially for emotional healing in terms of this episode, follow the links below. You can join the Taoist community. I'll see you there.